What is up, party people? Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And today we're going to be talking about the books that I read in May. I know I just posted a wrap-up right before this, but it is what it is. You'll just have to deal. I promise some other videos are on the way. But let's talk about the books that I read in May. It was a very meh reading month for me, I have to say. But June is going quite splendidly just in the week that we've had, so it's making up for it. At the top of the month, I read Squire. This is a young adult graphic novel that is following Isa. She is a young girl who's always dreamt about being a knight. She wants to join the military, and the military is serving this country that has colonized her area, her people, and so it's kind of like taboo. Like, her parents don't want her to become a knight, but she ends up doing so anyways. She is just dreaming about adventure and making a name for herself and becoming a hero. But as she is going through training and interacting with other people, she is discovering how much of a colonizer that this military is, all of the bad stuff that's happening. And so that is that. I don't think this is like a complete story. I think there's going to be a sequel, just based on the way that it ended, but I gave this one somewhere between like a 3.5 and a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The art is beautiful. I like the storytelling. I do just think that things were a little bit rushed. I wish we had some time to like sit with some of these ideas and these concepts and got to know some of these characters a little bit more. And especially at the end, it just felt very rushed. But other than that, I enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. Good stuff. So in May, I was also participating in this readathon called Read Your Own Adventure over on TikTok. Some of my TikTok mutuals were hosting this readathon, so I was joining. I very much flopped, as I do with readathons, but Squire and then the next 2 books that I read were a part of this readathon. So I read The Seep by Channa Porter. This is a dystopian-ish novella. We're following this woman named Trina. She's a trans woman, and she her life kind of changes after this very gentle but nonetheless world-changing invasion by an alien entity calling itself the Seep. Through the Seep, everything is connected. Capitalism falls, hierarchies and barriers are broken down. If something can be imagined, it's possible. And then eventually Trina's wife decides that she wants to be reborn as a baby, leaving Trina behind and their life behind. And Trina is obviously devastated by this and all of this stuff. She's like really chafing against like the idea of the Seep at this point. And she ends up seeing this child and is trying to save him from the Seep. All of this stuff. I feel like this really had the makings to be like a really like good book for me, but it just felt very aimless, and I don't really know what the point or the intention behind this book was. It just felt very flat for me, unfortunately. I mean, if you want to check it out, go ahead. This is not me dissuading you from checking it out, but it just didn't come together. It was very aimless and meandering and felt very purposeless. And maybe that was the point, but it didn't work for me. Another kind of sci-fi novella that I read was Fiona, which is following 2 IKEA employees. It's not an IKEA, but it's like an IKEA type of store. And one day when they're working, this elderly woman falls into a gap between worlds and falls into the multiverse. So they have to go in and save her. It's like this whole thing. I mean, this book is really supposed to be like commentating on capitalism and like corporate work culture and just like how like companies will like sacrifice their employees and all that stuff. And again, another book that I thought was like the perfect book for me, and it just didn't really work. I liked it a little bit more than The Seep. I gave this one 3 stars. I gave The Seep probably like a 2.5 stars. But with Fiona, what ended up happening is that this book was so much more focused on the relationship between the 2 coworkers they used to date, and they had just broken up like a week before the start of this book. So so much of it was focused on them and what didn't work in their relationship, and that's just like not what I wanted out of the story. So unfortunately it didn't work for me, but it was fine, and I do think I might check out the second book in this series. So then I read the only 5-star read of the month for me, and that was Recitative by Toni Morrison, and with a rather long introduction by Zadie Smith, but I loved both the introduction and the story. You may have heard of this. I mean, this book came out at the beginning of the year, maybe? I mean, it's an older story, but it got like repackaged and resold at the beginning of the year. But it's like following two women. It's supposed to be like a commentary on race. And we have these two women kind of starting from similar circumstances. They grew up in this, or they met each other at an orphanage. They were there temporarily, and we don't know the race of either woman. One is black, one is white, but we don't know. And we're kind of, you know, it's a very short story. I think it's like less than 30 pages. But we're following their lives and how their paths go and like different things that happened. And it's really interesting. I really liked it. I'm also very embarrassed to admit that this was my first Toni Morrison book that I read, and it's a short story, but I really liked it. I own Toni Morrison books on my shelves. I need to finally get around to reading them now. Then I read The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Good stuff. I love Silvia Moreno Garcia. Even though, like, this is my third book from her, I have not given any of the books that I've read from her 5 stars, but I have liked all of her books, and I feel like she's just like a comfort author for me. Like, I know I'll pick up one of her books and enjoy the reading experience. But The Beautiful Ones is about Nina. We actually have 3 protagonists. We have Nina, we have Hector, and we have Valerie. Nina is a young girl who is from the countryside. She grew up like relatively wealthy. She's from the countryside. This is like France, or like an alt France. I don't know. It's France-inspired world, I guess. But she is coming into town for the season, you know, for marriage and all that stuff. She's staying with her cousin, Valerie, who is, you know, older. She's married to Valerie's like direct cousin, so she's like a cousin-in-law. I don't know if that's even a phrase, but she is like this very cold woman who like really hates like where her life has taken her, and she's just very bitchy, for lack of a better term. And then Hector, who is this like telekinetic performer, and like has these interactions with Nina, but then Valerie's also involved, and it's just like, it's kind of like, okay, if you're wanting some like Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen type vibes, I think you'll really like this. It's like kind of like a historical romance, but with some light fantastical elements. But the fantastical elements are very, like I said, like very, very light. Okay, think of it more as like magical realism rather than fantasy. Because Nina also has telekinetic powers, and so she meets Hector and he's kind of training her and all this stuff, blah blah blah. But lots of drama. Loved the drama. Like, this was a very readable book. I read it in like 2 chunks, very easy to get through. I had a good time, but I didn't like it as much as the other 2 books that I read from Silvia Moreno Garcia. I think maybe I'd give this like a 3.75. It was fine. I was a little bit disappointed because there's been a lot of hype for this book in particular, and people are like, it made me cry, like it hit me so emotionally, and I just like didn't feel that. So I'm kind of disappointed, but I did enjoy it. Still love Silvia Moreno Garcia. That's that on that. And then I kind of wanted just like a really quick audiobook to get through. I was straightening my hair for graduation, and it's like such a process. It takes me like a while to straighten my hair. So I was like, you know what? I kind of feel like listening to like a really quick audiobook while I'm doing my hair. So I was like kind of perusing script, and I came across Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenti. This is a thriller horror-y novella. I'd heard some people talking about this. In particular, Kayla from Books and Lala, and she really liked it. So I was like, you know what, let me just check this out, because the audiobook was 2 hours long and I was listening to it on double speed, so I was able to get through it in like an hour and a half, because I kept pausing. But anyways, this was a really wild book. Okay, so here, let me just read the description of this book for you. Sophia was made for him, her perfect husband. She can feel it in her bones. He is perfect. Their home together in Arcadia Gardens is perfect. Everything is perfect. It's just the way he's always so much, so often. He works so hard. She misses him, and he misses her. He says he does, so it must be true. He is the perfect husband, and everything is perfect. But sometimes Sophia wonders about things, strange things, dark things. The look on her husband's face when he comes back from a long business trip. The questions he will not answer. The locked basement she's never allowed to enter, and whenever she asks the neighbors, they can't quite meet her gaze. But everything is perfect, isn't it? It is. This book was so wild. And like in between each chapter, we would get an excerpt from like the lease, or like the like housing agreement that people have to sign to live in this like neighborhood. And it was so wild. I don't know how to describe it. It was a good time though. I gave this 4 stars. It was definitely unsettling. And I'm not gonna spoil it, actually. I'll just leave it at that. Miss Marvel, Volume 2, Generation Y. I am really having a great time reading Miss Marvel right now. And at the time of recording, the Disney Plus show is going to finally air tomorrow. I'm very excited. This is just a good time. I like this more than Volume 1. If you don't know, Miss Marvel is following Kamala Khan. She is a Pakistani American Muslim girl from Jersey. She's a teen. She's in high school. She's a nerdy girl. Okay, she loves her like RPG games, and she's like a Captain Marvel stan. And so one day when she like was out at a party that she snuck out to, she's like coming home, and there's like this weird mist that envelops like the town, okay? And she like passes out, and when she wakes up, she like discovers that she has these powers, and that leads her to her whole Miss Marvel situation, saving the town, okay, Jersey's first superhero. And in the first book, we're introduced to this villain called the Inventor, and in the second book, we kind of wrap up the beginnings of that plot. We also get a really fun cameo from Wolverine, which was very exciting. Actually, okay, so I have since read the third one, which I'll talk about in my June wrap-up, but I think I'm going to become a Marvel Comics girly. Like, I think I'm actually going to go back, like, maybe not to the beginning, but I'm going to go back and start reading more of these Marvel comics, because I'm having such a good time, you know? But it's always been so much. It's, like, very daunting to me to, like, try to go and, like, jump into the Marvel Comics world, because there's just so much, and it's been around for, like, 50-60 years at this point, and it's just overwhelming. But I'm having a good time with this. I think once I'm done reading this G. Willow Wilson run, I'm gonna go and start reading other Marvel comics. Good time. And then I read this book that I like randomly picked up from the library. It was in the new book section, and I was like, you know what? I'm here for a paranormal romance moment right now. So I picked it up. It's called Lead Me Astray by Sondi Warner. And this actually was a Wattpad story that got published by Wattpad Books, which maybe should have been my first clue not to be a hater. I love fan fiction too. And Wattpad got popular after I was kind of like out of that fan fiction phase, or that era. I was like in college when it was like really popping off, and I wasn't really about that life anymore. But anyways, so I never really read much of Wattpad stories. I was never like on there really. So this is supposed to be like this adult paranormal romance set in New Orleans. It's a polyamorous relationship. We have, who do we have? Ori, who just died at the beginning of the story, and she's like a ghost. Zir, who is a werewolf detective, and Miz, who is an empath, and they're all like coming together to try to figure out what happened to Ori, and then relationship and all that stuff. And like in the beginning part of this book, I was in it, okay? I was having a good time. Even though it wasn't amazing, I was having a good time, and that's really all that mattered. And then it really just started to devolve very quickly. I made it about 60% of the way through the book, and I just could not get myself to keep reading anymore, so I DNF'd it, unfortunately. But it has pretty good ratings on Goodreads, so maybe you'll like it. I don't know. Lastly, I read Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen Ho. I read this for my local book club. 2 stars, unfortunately. I really didn't like this. This is following Fiona and Jane, childhood best friends, and we're just kind of following their life and their friendship. But this is actually more of like a collection of short stories rather than any sort of like cohesive storytelling. But even knowing that, I don't really think everything really came together, especially for a book that's like touted as being like this like friendship type story. Like, we don't really get like what makes their friendship click. You know, they met each other when they were kids and they kind of just like fell into being friends, which is like pretty common, right? But we never got to see the like beginning stages of their friendship, and like kind of the glue that's holding them together. We're just kind of like dumped into the middle of this story, and they're already kind of chafing against the friendship and like kind of falling apart and going their own ways and stuff like that. So it's kind of like difficult to like root for this friendship or kind of understand where they're coming from, because like we never got like that context from the beginning. This is also like non-linear storytelling, which I usually like. We're like bouncing between different times in their lives, but it just felt a little like I just needed more. We kept coming in right at the end of some major life event happening for each of these women, and it's always just them like reacting to it or like adjusting to it. And it was kind of annoying because I want to be like in the middle of that life event and like actually see what's going on. Like, especially towards the end with Fiona's chapters. Like, she has like 2 different marriages. She has a kid. She went back to law school. She was doing this, and that. Like, all like super quick, and we just like kind of glossed over it. I don't know. It was okay. The writing was like pretty good. I would check out more from this author. Like, I think this is her debut, so if she writes more in the future, I might check it out. But it just didn't really feel cohesive, and it just didn't really come together well for me. So that is all I have for my May wrap-up. I'm hoping June is going to be a better reading month for me. Yeah. Check me out on my various social media pages, Bookstagram, Book Talk. All of that will be down below, and I'll see y'all in the next video.